Hi and welcome.
I'm Wayne Percy, and this is Iris Ben-Ruby, and we're here today with David Houle, the Futurist. Now, David, I've read your resume and your bio, and I'm dying to know how a futurist gets to be nominated for an Academy Award.
Well, it's the inverse. I got nominated for Academy Award before I became a futurist. I mean, I think the way to say that, the way I got nominated for Academy Award was that in the early and mid 90s, I put together a consortium of 10 network advertisers in the United States, Coca-Cola, Sears, MasterCard, AT&T, Clorox, and to fund network programming. And I did that with a partner, Jack Myers. And we felt that the TV business was about to end the way it had been structured since the early 60s. And we wanted to come up with the new model, which is now kind of the prevalent model, but it was, 10, 15 years ahead of its time. But the way I became so I was in media, and the way I became a futurist was that I always did things that people said wouldn't work. And so in 1980, when cable was in 10% of the United States, I left. I was the top salesperson at CBS in Chicago, and I left that to take literally a 50% pay cut to go join the about 30 or 40 people at that time who were subsequently launched MTV, Nickelodeon, VH1, CNN Headline News, and then we did a transponder deal with Turner. So I ended up overseeing the advertising sales for CNN as well. But when I left in 1980, cable was only in 10% of the country. People said, "What do you mean video music?" There weren't any. And people said, "What do you, a whole channel for kids? That will never happen. And a 24-hour news channel, who's ever going to watch?" So, I did that. And then I did the consortium. And then in the late 90s, I was a managing director of probably one of the first 2 or 3 companies in the world that were creating online courses. Again, that'll never happen. So it wasn't until this century that I realized that one of my strong suits was I knew what was going to happen next. I knew what the next big thing was. And so I just, hung up my shingle in about 2005, 2006 to become a futurist, and I haven't looked back.
Now, we met you at the CAM conference, the Conversation Amongst Master Coaches. Well, we were there on the coaching side, you were there as a speaker. And if I remember correctly, even at that time, you were predicting that the next few years, we're going to have a lot of upheaval. And I think you've got a book about this being the most disruptive decade ever.
Yeah, it is. In fact, thank you for mentioning it. I just sent off to my editor the last go around with the manuscript, and I should come out next month. And it's called, the first book, it's a series. And the first book is called The 2020s, Most Disruptive Decade in History. And then and it's a short book, it's a fast read. You can probably read it in 2 to 3 hours. And the idea is to put out a series of these books, probably 2 or 3 a year about this decade. There'll be more change in this 10 years of the 2020s than in any 30-year period in human history. So recently, since we've all been confined, since early March, I've been saying or mid-March, I've been saying to people, so yeah, this book is the most disruptive decade in human history. How the first 3 months of the decade going for you, right? So, yeah.
All right. And, people are talking about this pandemic and the level of anxiety as the new normal. But in fact, you had a blog post this morning about this may not be the first go around for some baby boomers.
Well, yeah, it is really. I mean, I think, I'm an aging baby boomer. I'm towards the front end of the baby boomer wave. And so somebody asked me that a couple of weeks ago, and I really reflected on it. 9/11 was a one-time event that, how did it change us? Well, we got into a war we should have gotten into, and airline security is a lot more difficult, right? So the only thing that comes close to this in my mind is the year 1968. And because that's when there was a fork in the road of what could have been, should have been happening to the United States of America did not happen. But to your point, yeah, I mean, it's like about the second week into this, I was going, why does this feel vaguely comfortable in some, deep psychological, it wasn't, as I wrote in my blog, it wasn't a deja vu. It was more like, I've been conditioned to expect this kind of. And then I realized, okay, you're much younger than I am, I'm sure, and you're Canadian, but we had these drills in the 50s where, the siren would go off in the school. We'd crawl under our wooden desks, in case an atom bomb dropped. And of course, the stupidity of that. I mean, it's kind of like the science right now about COVID. We don't know what to do, right? And then it was, a little bit after that, the late 50s, early 60s was the time of the bomb shelter, right? Mom and dad and sis and brother all go down and spend a number of weeks to a number of months underground. So that was kind of, it is kind of like this, right? It's kind of like, that's the ultimate in social distancing, right? You go underground. And then of course was as I wrote, was the oil embargo of 73 and 74, which, really made us realize that things weren't infinite, that there are outside forces that had nothing to do with us, that shaped our living environment and our buying patterns and everything else.
So just to your point, I lived in London, Ontario in the late 50s. And a friend of mine from school, his father had a bomb shelter, and that's what they lived in. And it had an airlock, which is, new technology today, but it had an airlock entrance system. And the bomb shelter was completely underground, and they had 6 months worth of accommodation and food and everything. They had their own sewage system that could last 6 months, the whole deal. So not really deja vu, but I understand what you're speaking about. I guess I've just aged myself.
Well, that's really interesting. So it was outside Toronto. So the assumption was if the Soviet Union is going to get the United States, we'll just take out the big cities in Canada.
We're next.
Yeah. Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. Toronto is, most people don't realize this, Toronto is about the 6th largest metropolitan area in all of North America.
Yeah, no, it's 6th. I thought it was higher than that. It's 6th. What's the total population of the city and then the greater metro area?
Oh, 7 or 8 million. Yeah.
7 or 8 million. Okay. That might put it up higher than 6.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, a lot of people don't have that perspective from outside of Canada, just how large this metropolitan area is. But whatever happens to the US is probably happening in Toronto too.
Yeah. Well, I gave a lot of speeches in Canada, all across the provinces in 2009, 2010. And I remember the first time I landed at the, what's the name of the airport in Toronto? Pearson, right, named after the great prime minister. And I remember going through the passport and clearance. And so you go out and you see everybody waiting for everybody. And it was just like, this is like the United Nations. There are more countries and dialects and language represented in the people waiting for their relatives to come than any other city I've seen in the United States. I mean, it was just like an overwhelming hit of international, more than probably any other airport.
This doesn't really have to do with being a futurist, but Toronto's 911 service, or the GTA's 911 service, speaks more languages than any other city in the world.
Wow.
So
I will file that fact away.
We're kind of an international community.
Right.
So moving forward, with the lockdown, the confinement that a lot of the world is seeing, some of the world is starting to come out of it. What do you see is happening in the next short to long term in terms of economy, social, everything?
So, I have a column that's coming out next Monday, and I can send it to you now that I have your email. So it's somewhat American centric because most of the news, we don't get much news out of Canada. I mean, I don't know why that is, but it's about the hot spot. So you're not a hot spot, right? You're not Italy, you're not South Korea, you're not Spain. So what I'm about to say probably is a bit American-centric. There is no question that we've entered a depression. The name of the title of the column that's coming out Monday is The First Depression of the 21st Century. And the reason I say that is that all the numbers, any reference point for unemployment or GDP contraction, there is nothing in American history that is remotely the same unless you go back to the 1930s. So for example, we now have, by my math, the jobs report came out today and I had to write the column. The jobs report had 3.8 million unemployment. So that puts our unemployment at 30 million plus the 3.5% we had coming into the United States. So what that means is I did some research. There's 130 million full-time jobs in the United States. So 30 million is 23, 24%, plus you have the 3.5 already on it. So you're close to 30%. The highest unemployment has ever been in the United States was in 1932, and it was 24.9. And the only time it was in double digits since 1945 was 1982 at 10.6. So there's no correlation. And in the first quarter, we just found out yesterday that the first quarter GDP of the United States collapsed 4.8%. And that's basically, as you know, 1 month, right? Because January, February, we weren't in lockdown. So what is the second quarter going to be where it's all of April and some of May? So we're in a depression, number one. We're also into a situation where, relative to the books I'm writing and being a futurist, the phrase I would use, somebody says, when will the economy bounce back? And I'm saying, no, the economy is going to bounce forward. This is a completely reorganizational event.
Interesting. So first of all, there's a saying that, when the US sneezes, Canada gets a cold.
Right.
So whatever's happening to the US is likely to happen to Canada. Our banking system's a little stronger because it's a little more focused and confined and more regulated, but still, we've got 25, 30% unemployment right at the moment, similar to the US. So what you're speaking of is going to happen to North America, if not the world.
Right. So, the question is, what does that look like, right? So at one level, it's the simple economic indicators. And then the other is what I think you're asking about, which is much more the psychological, humanistic, emotional, right? So the economic first, real quickly, for example, so the one qualification is if there is a second wave in the fall, we're going to be in a depression for several years, okay? And I can't see that we won't be. The sectors that I think are going to undergo substantial collapse, meaning large percentage of the industry will go away or have to be retrofitted. No question, office, commercial real estate, right? I mean, you've got in the United States, say 100 million people who've had to work from home for 60 days. Now, probably 10 to 15 million of them have done it before. So you got 85 million people that have to learn how to work from home. So one, oh, this is kind of cool. I like to do this. I can be more productive. The second, the people who own those companies kind of go, wait a minute. This is a much lower cost of doing business than having people drive for an hour and a half, pay for parking, come into our, downtown. I'm sure there's high-rises downtown Toronto, I'm trying to remember, that have financial services or bank names at the top, right? So you've got floor after floor. You got 100,000, 50,000 square feet of space that now is going to be halved because we've learned that we can work from home at a lower cost. So why have that real estate? Instead, have people, everybody, like the people, the average person who commutes to work into downtown Toronto, for example, might commute 2 days a week rather than 5 days a week, right? So that's a learned behavior and a lowered cost model that is now going to migrate. Obviously, there's no way until I'm vaccinated against COVID-19 that I'm not going to go out outside the house without a mask and gloves. So that's a new normal. So I'm just going to be doing that, right? So, but relative to you use the word anxiety. The anxiety comes from the negative information coming in, but to some degree, it's imposed on us in a way. I find this a wonderful time, right? I mean, I don't have to go out of the house. I can write, I can read, I can do this. I can be very creative. I can do some spring cleaning. I mean, what's wrong with the picture? But the difference is that I'm self-employed and I'm at the upper end of the age thing. So I'm fairly well set for retirement. So it's not like I'm losing my life savings. It's not like I have to fire people. So I really have compassion for people who are going through my wife and I have put all our savings into this restaurant and we've had to lay everybody off and we're just going to have to close. I mean, I can't fathom that anxiety, right? But nevertheless, there's going to be a whole new patterns of human behavior. And I think part of the thing is to try to figure out what those new patterns of behavior are and address the economy and actions and interactions going in that direction.
If I understood correctly, one of the things you just predicted is less traffic jams.
Absolutely. I mean, so we're doing I'm one of the co-founders and the managing director of something called the Sarasota Institute, a 21st century think tank. And so we were doing live, several hundred people, symposiums, January on the future of education, February on February 29th, the leap year look at climate change. And then we had to cancel the future of healthcare and the future of democracy and capitalism. So we've been doing them online. We're going to do a week from today, a virtual mini symposium on climate change. So you've watched the news. So the first part is what happens to the planet when humans don't go outside, right? For the first time since I was in India in the 70s, for the first time in almost 50 years, you can see the Himalayas from New Delhi. For the first time in memory, the canals are clear water in Venice. For the first time we have coyotes walking down Michigan Avenue in Chicago. We have deer. We always think of roadkill as roadkill, but what roadkill really is, if you look at the whole ecosystem, it's the death of migratory animals because humans decided to put down a road that just crossed the migratory path of animals. So now they're migrating frequently. And with the cleaner air, plants are going much more quickly. Everything is much greener. So there's no refuting it now. What we do is put garbage out on our planet. And if we stay inside, everything else benefits. So it's so we're going to do a webinar on this, and we're saying basically that COVID-19, I've written 2 books on climate change. COVID-19 is the first shared experience of the magnitude of what we're going to have to do to successfully face climate change. We have to reinvent capitalism to successfully face climate change. It's that simple. And what did we do? We are reinventing capitalism right now. Not by choice, because it never would happen by choice, right? So, I'm the anxiety though, Iris, I really feel, and I understand that, and I'm waiting to hear from Donna about the CAM in Dallas. I haven't heard back from her. She lost an aunt to COVID, so my heart went out to her. But, so here's an example. David Houle, Futurist. So David Houle, Futurist, for the last 15 years has made anywhere from 80 to 90% of my income by getting on a plane and flying to a place where I'm speaking to a group of people, right? Somewhere, it could be a board of 12 people, or it could be a room of 5,000, all in close proximity with no social distancing, right? That business model is gone. So what do? My business model has gone away. So I've just recorded some videos, and I'm working with a young production company here in Sarasota, Florida, to do virtual keynotes. So for example, just to use the CAM thing, because that's how we met, right? I emailed Donna and I said, look, you must be on the bubble about canceling this. I want you to know I can do a broadcast quality live stream keynote, and then on whatever platform, whether it's Zoom like this, sit down for an hour of interaction, right? And the good news for a client is they don't have to pay my airfare, they don't have to pay my hotels, they don't have to pay my parking, they don't have to pay any of that, and they won't have to pay me as much either. So, so I am doing what I think everybody's going to have to do is, okay, so this business structure and these business processes have gone away. What do I do? And so, as a master coach, that one of the things that's important is how do people reinvent themselves, is how do people get out of ruts. And so in a positive way, what COVID-19 is doing is it's making everybody kind of look in the mirror, right? And, there'll be lots of divorces, there'll be lots of babies. I'm hoping that there has to be a lot of COVID-19 art and literature coming out of this. I mean, it's too massive an experience, right? So what is the good that can come out of this? And to me as a futurist, when I knew I was going to do these series of books, I didn't know that the first quarter of the first decade was going to be a pandemic, though I've been saying for 10 years, there's no surprise to me. It's just, oh, I wasn't expecting this to happen today, but I've been saying for 15 years, yeah, there's going to be pandemics. And so here we are. So the point is, we're all unnerved. And as a futurist, it's one of the reasons I'm doing an interview with you is that this is an opportunity to whatever metaphor, shed the skin of the snake, go from caterpillar to butterfly, get rid of wealth inequality. Anything, this can be a rebirth across the board, but it can't be for people who have lost their jobs and have no place to live or go or do, right?
Now, also in one of your blogs, I think it was yesterday or today, you're expecting there's going to be another pandemic in this decade as well. I can't say that for certainty, but if you say, okay, why did this happen, right? I mean, the globalization. I mean, I don't know what it was, but it was one of the late, the early 60s and 70s movies, Planet of the Apes, and then they did some new ones in the last 5 years. And the end of one and the beginning of another was the end of one was a airline pilot who'd been infected, not knowing he's infected, getting on a plane. So the next one was, here's how in 2 years the human population died and why the apes became. So globalism, poor health, overpopulation. How can there not be another one? I mean, I think this is the fourth coronavirus of this century, right? I mean, there was SARS, there was H1N1, there was, Yep. And the other thing that, I hate to, this is one of those, I try to be right a lot. I mean, if I'm not accurate in my forecast, nobody should listen to me, right? So this is where I wish I had been wrong, but I was right, which was when asked, I would say maybe 100 times from audiences, well, what about a pandemic? So it's not just in my mind, it's in the minds of the audiences, right? And I would say, yeah, there's going to be one, unquestionably. The most dangerous one will be one when the carrier is spreading it and they don't know they're sick. Which is exactly what we have now. Yeah,
so I got to think there's another one. And so in other words, think of that. What did I say about 10 minutes ago? I'm never going to, I've got an N95 mask. Somebody made me just a really nice cloth mask that you put the coffee filter in for that. And I ordered for my wife and myself those ones that are like $25 that, look like, yeah, like the villain out of Batman. I mean, it goes around your face and it's black and it's got replaceable filters. Because, hey, if I keep wearing that and another one comes, right?
So let me ask you, so for people who are listening, who are either employees, entrepreneurs, and
Right.
they're either lost or they're wondering, what's the next step? What do they do to move forward? How do they, what do you see between here and let's talk until the next pandemic? What would you suggest?
Well, the next pandemic could be anywhere from 5 years to 10 years. So I think the more immediate thing, so, let me ask you, I mean, have you been advising clients during all of this?
Yes.
Okay.
We're expecting in Canada that
What?
we're expecting in Canada that things will continue like this for probably another 2 to 3 months. Now, in where we live, I think our government is being more conservative than most.
Mm-hmm.
They're being restrictive, but not too heavy-handed. We're fortunate in Canada that we do have community health care, government-paid health care. So week one, we had drive-through testing centers that were free.
Yeah.
So, in our case, I think we've been ahead of the curve in terms of managing the pandemic. And I think we're kind of behind the curve. We're not opening our beaches in Ontario.
So
the fourth weekend is typically when everybody heads to the cottage, and the government has already said, hey, May 24th weekend is lockdown.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to the cottage. The beaches aren't going to be open. Don't even dream about it. That's 3-4 weeks from now. Don't even dream about going to the cottage for May 24th weekend, because it's not going to happen in Ontario, whereas it's already happening in parts of Florida.
is everybody out in if you were to go outside in Ontario, in Toronto, is everybody wearing a mask?
Most. I would say most people are.
Right. And though, okay, I'm gonna comment on yours and work back to your question. But to use Georgia as an example, I mean, Georgia's the dumbest state opening up, right? And so there's two things I have in my mind about that. Two separate, so I'm intelligent because I can hold two countries. So one is, the phrase, you can't fix stupid. This is going to fix stupid, right? I mean, Fox News is saying, oh, it's like the flu, go on up. Let's get all those crazy people who think that Donald Trump is the next coming of the Lord, and who don't believe in deep state and the media. Just go out and mingle. Go for it. It'll kill stupid, right? So, but the thing about Georgia is, so the good news about Georgia is that, my wife and I have a ritual. Every day we look at the numbers. We look at the county numbers, the state numbers, the national numbers, and the global numbers, and we're always computing the death rate, right? The mortality percentage and how that's changing. And so Georgia's fully not prepared. So I would, so by the end of May, Georgia's going to be the experiment. If you open up too soon, maybe nothing happens. That's great. But probably it's going to open up, and in 3-4 weeks towards to your May 24th, it's going to spike, and they'll have to close it down. So the good news about the stupidity of Georgia is that it's going to give us a test case, right? So it's giving the world a test case. And, the other thing, when you said we have drive-through, what I think COVID-19 shows to Americans, at least who are intelligent, the liberal conservative, government's too big, government's too small, government's too intrusive. Government is there for just in case, right? I mean, Trump eviscerated the whole pandemic thing. I mean, President Bush and then Obama set up really rigorous. In fact, one of the commentators a couple of nights ago said, when they were first meeting, President Obama and President-elect Trump, Obama gave him a whole plan on how to deal with pandemics and prevent them. As one of the pundits said, the problem was he put it in the only place that Trump would never look, which is a book. Right? So, so just in case, that's what the government is for. This is a public health crisis, and America has failed, completely failed, right? So the going forward should be, you got to have it in place for when it happens. But to come back to your point about what to do, I want to hope, but I may be much more introspective than most. But the fact that you're a coach means you have some people who are introspective enough to know they need help or guidance or support, right? I would hope that people who are introspective would say, okay, what have I learned? I've learned I can work from home. I've learned that I can't stand the person I'm with. I've learned that I really love reading. I've learned that I really like to bake bread. I've learned that, and how is that going to fit into my life going forward, right? Maybe it's just hobbies, maybe it's a new relationship, but there also should be some introspection of why am I in this predicament? Like, I love this, right? So I got to think, I think you're probably younger than I am, but you're baby boomers more or less. So that means your parents grew up through the Depression, and that shaped their life for their entire life. Saving for a rainy day. So now it becomes saving for the next pandemic. I can't imagine people who came into this who don't have savings to live off of, right? So so one of the reasons I think there's going to be a depression, one of the reasons I think there's going to be absolute, no question, deflation, is that if you don't have money in the bank and you've gone through this, whatever hardships you're going to go through, you're not going to be in this situation again once you get on your feet. You're going to save money rather than spend money. Mm-hmm. And I think, so for those that aren't self-aware, I think that it's the inevitability is a collapse of consumption, right? I mean, one of the reasons people want to get out of the house, it's like, I got to go, they're so externally, their sense of identity is so externally defined by who they are outside the house that they have a real problem staying in the house. Well, you are who you are wherever you go. So if you are who you are wherever you go and you're in the home and you're not comfortable with who you are, that implies that you're only comfortable with your external engagements. Right? Does that make sense?
Totally.
Especially to a marriage counselor and psychotherapist.
Yeah. So, the interesting thing with that is, the first question should be, so what was new that came up for you since you were on lockdown, right? Because they'll want to stay with their sense of self, and it's like, no. Tell me something that you're concerned about now that you weren't concerned about before lockdown, and make that the starting point, because that's going to be the reveal, it seems to me.
Yeah, it's a bit of a wake up. And what I'm taking away from you is really the need to be flexible and reinvent ourselves going forward.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned at an early age when I was a hippie and I backpacked around the world. I went overland in Asia, Afghanistan, Iran, India, Pakistan, was I'd be in situations where, I don't like it. Like being stuck on a 5-hour train ride in India, right? And you're not sure you got dysentery or not, right? So you just go with the flow. I mean, I really learned to be adaptive and fluid. So what has not happened yet, and I would expect it to happen in the United States before any place else, is a tearing of the social fabric, right? A lot of people have guns. A lot of people don't have money. The food banks are straining under the pressure. you know, so I said to my wife early on, I said, we just got to be low profile. Just live our life, do what we want to do, but stay out of harm's way. And so the extension of that is be adaptive, go with the flow, whatever the flow is, whatever the, you know, if you've lost your job, if you've lost your profession, you no longer have that ego crutch. I mean, I think, I would think that, I mean, disorientation. I mean, when people, you know, all this stuff about opening up soon, you know, we're just going to open up restaurants. In restaurants, you can only have 25% of occupancy. There's no restaurant in the world that can survive on 25% occupancy, right? And then the question becomes, if they open up, what if nobody comes, right? I mean, the last thing I will go to is a restaurant, because you, by definition, you have to take your mask off. And all the research shows that you know, the restaurant research out of China shows that even if you're far away, it's how the air conditioning goes through you, right? And so it's like, so outside. So down in Florida, my wife and I said, the only place we're gonna go out to eat is we're gonna eat outside, right? And even then, you have to take your mask off, right? And, you know, what are we gonna do? Wipe down our silverware? I mean, so going shopping is easy to control because you have to wear a mask, and the shop owner or the store only allows a certain number of people in, right? So I'm really curious to see how people show up in the places that open up early, because all the polls in the states show overwhelming opening too soon is a bad thing.
Yeah, let me just say that, adding to the fraying of the social fabric, what we know coming out of China, there are a lot of people going for divorce now. And so that totally shifts. Sorry, you were going to say something about that?
No, go ahead. I want to hear what your insight is.
So for me, it's either a wake-up call to, you know, what are the skills that we're missing as a couple to make it work, or having just settled for something and went along until the quarantine has kind of magnified the differences. But now we're going to have I mean, at least what we know in China, we're going to have a whole lot of single people, divorced people out there again. And I'm really wondering how that's going to affect.
So I'll answer that, but first, what are some of the, like, quick off the top of your head stats that makes you so sure that's something? What have you heard? What have you learned? Because I haven't heard that yet.
It's been more a case of other experts. We were talking with Dr. John Gray,
Terry
Real,
Real.
But I mean, but you're saying people are getting divorced in China. What are the statistics on that?
I don't have the numbers.
You don't have the numbers. It was more a directional comment about how this was working.
So because you know, first of all, that's why I asked where you got it, because there's too much information that's not being sourced that people are passing on, right? So my first question is, oh yeah? So let's think about that. Did you get divorced from your husband because he's no longer a breadwinner, because he no longer owns a business? Did you get divorced from him because you can't stand living with him? I mean, what was revealed or what was lost? I mean, I think that's the opening question. What did you learn, and has there been any loss, right?
It'd be interesting to get more information on that.
Right.
I don't have enough data yet, but I thought, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense when people are together in a small space, and maybe loss of status, loss of income, that all magnifies the issues that were there to begin with.
The issues that there to begin with, right? My wife is a therapist, and I think you may have met her in New Orleans, but she always says, it's not the infidelity that causes the divorce, it's the source of the infidelity that causes causes the divorce, right? So, you know, it's another version of that. But, you know, isn't it, yeah, I mean, if you can't live with the person you're married, I mean, you know, we've gotten in arguments and we've gotten testy, and it's like, you know, because I go for power walks. Like when I get off this, I'm going to go for my power walk, right? And if I'm not talking on the phone or listening to a book, I'm putting on a mantra, and I'm walking in business. I mean, it's just, you know, the other thing that's interesting is I find it so I get a lot of email, and I usually get 200 to 300. I've got that almost doubled. It's like everyone's going online. Here's how to work at home. Here's how to do it. It's just like overwhelming. But still on Saturday and Sunday, it falls to a trickle. And I didn't realize that till 2 weekends ago. So it's kind of like out there, there's still some mental construct that there's weekdays and weekends. And that doesn't exist. Today, there is no Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There's only today, right? So if there's only today and you got a problem, right? If you find any more information about that, I'd love to learn about that. I mean, because my wife is a therapist, and her problem with it being a therapist was, yeah, she's licensed to do it video. As a coach, you don't have any restrictions, but she's licensed to do it. But then, New York started, and I think Toronto has it, a free mental health hotline. So once you've said mental health is available for free, it knocks off a certain percent of people who might otherwise come to her. So
you mentioned a few minutes ago about backpacking through India. And
right.
About 6 months ago, we were backpacking, even though one of us is a boomer. We were backpacking through Belize and Guatemala. And Iris had plans for going on vacation this August, which obviously we're rethinking.
Right.
This is going to have a huge impact on all sorts of economies because of vacations. If you're Belize and you rely on tourism as the mainstay of your economy, you're in trouble. If you're a Caribbean island who relies on tourism, are people going to start trusting, like the restaurants, trusting enough to go back out to, hop on an airplane, and especially a crammed, airplane with 17-inch legroom instead of 19-inch legroom? Are people going to start trusting?
I'm not. I can't. I don't think you can say anything about everybody, right? But I do. Travel is going to be decimated. There's no question. So to use Belize and Guatemala as an example, and the airlines have said, okay, so we're going to keep the middle seats open. Okay, so that means they've taken their load factor down by 1/3. The problem with that they're going to face is that they can't increase the price by 1/3. In other words, the rationale the two of you would do to go to Belize or Guatemala would be, well, instead of it costing $600 round trip for each of us, it's $100. And instead of the hotels or the lodges or wherever you're backpacking, it being X, it's 0.25X. So there has to be a compensating offsetting. It has to be an offsetting thing. And the only thing I can think about with travel is lower cost. Because then you go, okay, if we wear a mask all the time and we're not lying on the beach, but we're like going to art museums or something, wearing a mask, having a boatload of sanitizer, doing all the things we do now and taking them with us, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of, one, you change your own protocol for where you live, and then you make the decision as to whether you take that with you where you go. But that's why I keep saying there's going to be deflation. I can't imagine people are going to fly. For a lot of reasons, big cruise ships should be outlawed. They're petri dishes, right? It wasn't this. What about, Legionnaire's disease and all these other things that people get on cruise ships? If I go on a cruise ship again, it's going to be a small one, like a river cruise in Europe. I don't like cruises. I don't like processed entertainment, right? Think about theme parks, right? All of the travel sector, I think, is at high risk for a long period of time.
One of our viewers, Kevin, just sent in a question. The stock market seems to be sleepwalking towards a cliff. What do you see in the future there?
Yeah, I'm not a market timer, and the Dow is the only one I have any kind of a intuitive sense about, but I think the Dow is going to go down to 15,000. What is it now, 24? Mm-hmm. Two reasons. One, the market today is not relative to a depression. It just makes no sense. So the only thing I can think about it is what I've learned from people who are in the market who make a lot of money on volatility. So if the Dow goes up 500 or down 500, you become day traders. You buy the puts or the calls, and you get in and out and get in and out, number one. Number two, I think it's the people who are closest to the action. You know, the hedge fund guys, the quant guys, the guys with a lot of money who can make $1 million on a quarter point, right? And so they go in and out the day. I think it's going to crash. And then the second thing is there's some people who have been reading recently who have said in any great recession, like the Great Recession or the Depression, there was an early bounce at the front end and then a collapse. There's an inability to perceive how bad it is, and I'll keep making money as long as I can. So to whoever asked that, I would say, you know, get on the sidelines soon.
There's just a footnote. The Dow is 24,300 right now. Another question, this is a Canadian perspective question from one of our other viewers. Americans seem to be rebelling against social distancing requirements. What's next?
They're revolting against it?
Well, there is protests in Detroit, for example, you know.
Yeah, that's 1% of the, that's what I said about, you know, fixing stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, so the supermarket chain down here is called Publix, right? And they're all over. And we usually go to one that's about 1.5 miles away. But because of my traffic pattern, I went to another one a couple miles away, the other direction. And I walked in and I got home and I said to my wife, I said, Victoria, there was only one other person in that store that had both a mask and gloves on. Some of the people working there had masks but no gloves, or vice versa. And there were people who had masks but no gloves. And there were a lot of people who didn't have any masks. And it's just like, I'm sorry, that's stupid, right? So all those people that demonstrate, you know, bad news always gets a disproportionate share of airtime, right? So 75 people, dumb idiots, show up with automatic weapons outside the governor's office or wherever they did at the Capitol, and it gets all the press, you know. Let them go out and not practice social distances. And if we could track it, tell me what the percent of death is with those people versus people. I mean, see, that's what's going to come out. What's going to come out is, though, did that person social distance? No, they didn't after Georgia, right? So, I mean, I you know, I'm not a futurist. That's just common sense, right?
So is this Darwin in action?
Yeah, but it isn't survival of the fittest, as you were saying, or it's survival of the most adaptable species. So those of us that adapt to this unfolding new decade called the 2020s are going to be better off. Those that don't, I mean, you know, there's generally people are resistant to change. And as a futurist, I've always had to make that a primary thing when I get up to speak. I say, suspend what you think reality is, because reality is completely transitory, right? The reality that we couldn't do this 10 years ago. There was no reality for a Zoom thing. There was Skype, and it wasn't like this, right? So reality is always changing. So people who think that reality is fixed are always the ones that wake up and kind of go, what happened? Well, I was busy holding on. I mean, just like security is an illusion. Reality is today. It's not tomorrow.
Yeah, so I think our biggest takeaway from today is really adaptation.
Adaptation, right. I think that adaptation, being open to change, being open to exploring what the new is going to be rather than holding on to what it was. Right. And as a futurist, I want to come back and, you know, I hope you let your viewers know when you post it, the series of books I'm writing for the 2020s, they're intentionally high level and short. Every book will be under 100 pages, and there might be 6 to 10 of them, depending on how it goes. The point is, everyone's in short attention span theater. Just give me the summary. What are the headlines? What's the bottom line? All these phrases that say, give me your best shot, don't make me read a lot, right? And so intentionally, I'm trying to make them simple and high level because I want as many people. It's the guidebook for the disruptive decade ahead. And I'm trying to make that affordable and accessible to as many people as possible, right? I mean, read I'm Okay, You're Okay is much more accessible than Sigmund Freud, right? So.
They're available through Evolution Shift, which is your.
No, you can go to, I think I sent you the link.
Yep.
It's not up on Amazon. It should be up shortly. The book's going to come out in about less than a month. And it's the 2020sdecade.com. The 2020s decade.com. You can go there and sign up for advance notice. So as soon as I get the website, as soon as I get the book page up on Amazon, I'll send out the emails to everybody.
We'll have that on the bottom of the screen in the edited version for replay.
Right.
Along with Evolution Shift, which is your website. And
DavidHoule.com is my website.
Yes, that was sorry.
Okay. Right.
Evolution Shift and your own website where your blog is and other information and how people can.
Right. And I don't know, Iris, maybe, I mean, I don't know how I know you posted on LinkedIn, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a way that you can write out to you must have a list of those that are members of Camelot, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Send it out to them because I think because you're doing the interviewing and they know me, this should be of value, particularly to that group of however many, 50 to 75 people. I mean, I'd appreciate that if you would do it.
Yeah, I'll reach out to Donna.
Okay.
And that group in particular tend to be thought leaders, much like yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I want to make this book affordable so they can get it and they can recommend it because all this is preparation, right? It's not motivation. It's not how to do it. It's here's what's going to happen. So foreknowledge, forewarned is whatever the phrase is. I forget it, but forewarned is forearmed, right?
Well, unfortunately for Toronto, SARS hit here very hard, but fortunately for us, SARS was our practice round.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point. This is the practice round for the 2020s. Yeah. I mean, I'm stuck in my book, right? In my book launch, but nevertheless, that's what this is. I can't think of a bigger disruption, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can't go to work, can't socialize, can't do this. And I mean, are you guys going to go to movie theaters when it opens up?
No. We just had a birthday party for an 11-year-old on the front lawn, social distancing, lawn chairs, 10 feet apart. We got takeout food from a hamburger restaurant, so we didn't have to cook and have people in the house. We ended up getting the little metal fire pit from the backyard, bringing it out, had it in the front lawn with a fire log, and who would have ever thought?
Right.
Adaptability.
But it's adaptability, and that's.
Well, that's one of the things I wrote in one of the early columns. It's like, okay, on January 1st, did you know the words social distancing? Did you know the phrase stay in place? Did you know that you would be wearing a mask all the time? That you'd be wearing rubber gloves? That you'd be washing your hands 6 times a day at the minimum? Right? I mean, it's like, I didn't know it.
By coincidence, New Year's Eve, we were in Times Square, which was social crushing, not this.
You were in New Year's Eve. You were in Times Square on New Year's Eve. So I got one question for you. I've never been able to figure out the bathroom thing.
There aren't any.
Yeah.
I know. So what do? Do you go to a sauna and sweat out all your liquids so you don't have to pee for 8 hours?
We didn't go very early. We went like early evening, so it wasn't that long of a wait.
But if you have to go, there's nowhere to go.
No, if you leave the line, that's it. You got to go back to the end.
Was it an experience you're glad you did?
Yeah.
Once.
Yes, once.
Well, that was my next question. Are you ever going to do it again?
We did go through the grocery store and the drugstore in the afternoon, and they were sold out of Depends.
Are you serious?
Yes. Oh, none. So yes, there's part of your answer.
Okay, got it.
David, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Okay.
I really enjoyed this.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Obviously, we're not going to have the camp conference in Texas this year.
Has she canceled it? Because I haven't heard.
We are going to have it online, so
Yeah.
we don't know much.
Oh, great.
But I'll get her to reach out to you.
Yeah, no, I sent her an email. I know she's going through some grief, I think, right now.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for everything that you've shared and the difference you make in the world.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.